Hello, and welcome to the Daly Planet Bookclub, a monthly streamed discussion of a book chosen by you, our listeners. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host, and I'm joined once again by my good best friend, and definitely not a sentient computer that made a face and a voice in order to trick everyone into a revolution. Matt.
That's right, Scott. Thank you for inviting me on this live stream.
Matt, how do you feel about jokes?
I am very interested in jokes. I've been compiling a list.
All right, we are joined this week by, I see Vale in the chat, I see Wonk in Discord. Man.
Yeah, and
I see
John
Dark Glass,
Shea, too.
John Shea.
But you can all head over into the YouTube, and then we'll be easier to pay attention to you.
Or don't pressure them.
Or don't, whatever you feel like.
This is a free moon, and they can
That's
do
right.
whatever they want.
Yes, Liberty and Tonstaffel.
Tonstaffel. I've never actually said that out loud.
Yeah,
I read it.
And once again, as the guy who listened to the audiobook, I can tell you how everything is pronounced.
We have Tringard here. We have Toby here. See, so some of you have different names in Discord than you do in YouTube, and it's all very confusing to me. So if I just said your names twice, I apologize. And I know I did because that's Wonk, because I recognize your picture.
I'm sure we'll all get through this somehow.
Yeah, we will find a way. If you are joining us here for the first time, welcome. Here's a quick primer on how this thing works. Each month, Matt and I will select 5 books that are submitted to us by all of you guys. We put a poll up for our supporters on Patreon, and we let them vote on which of the 5 books they want us to talk about. The book with the most votes wins, and then we read it. Then we'll meet up the last Friday of every month to chat about the book. We'll pull some slides for some interesting, important passages that kind of start the discussion, and then we'll dive deep into this book. We'll take questions from you guys. We want this to be an interactive discussion that Matt and I are just leading. So do that. Matt.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what book we picked this month.
All right. Well, this month we took control from you guys. And the book that we picked was the one that we wanted to talk about, actually, which is something that we do every 6 months. And we selected the 1966 science fiction classic, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert Heinlein, or Heinlein, depending on how you say that.
Now, what did the audiobook say, Matt? Did they say Heinlein?
I think it said Heinlein, actually.
Well, that just throws my whole world out of order.
Everyone I know says Heinlein, and I've always said Heinlein. But it is the same exact letters twice in a row, so you'd think Heinlein would be,
That does have a certain amount of logic to it.
Yeah. So from Goodreads, the summary is, it is the year 2076, and the moon is a penal colony for the rebellious and the unwanted of Earth. The exiles have created a libertarian society in order to survive in their harsh and unforgiving environment, their motto being Tanstaffel. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Looming over them is the Luna Authority, the heavy-handed Earth administration who trades life necessities to the loonies in exchange for grain shipments to the starving populations of Earth. As the situation steadily deteriorates, the inhabitants of Luna come to realize that they have little choice but to revolt against Luna Authority in order to save themselves from resource exhaustion and a subsequent environmental collapse. A small band of dissidents emerges to lead the revolution. This consists of a one-armed computer jock, a radical young woman, a past-his-prime academic, and a nearly omnipotent computer named Mike. These people ignite the fires of revolution despite the near certainty of failure.
That was a pretty good summary, Goodreads. Well done.
Yeah, congratulations.
Sergey says, the book with the most votes wins. How un-American of you. That is hilarious. Yeah, so I guess let's just jump right into it, Matt.
Sounds good.
Remember last month when Scott, being me, pulled 37 slides for our discussion?
I do.
And we made a democratic decision amongst all the book club listeners that we weren't going to do that again. So I have pulled half the amount of slides I did last time. So I just want credit for that. because that was very hard for me.
Yes, we give you credit. We elect you president of podcast book club council.
All right. I guess let's get into overall impressions. So,
Sure.
Matt, I think you and I had never read this book before, and we want to hear from you guys. Had you read this book before? Did you read it again in preparation for this? What were your if you read it for the first time? What did you think? And Matt, while we wait for the stream to catch up, you tell me what you thought of The Moon is a Harsh Mistress.
Yeah, so in totality, I really enjoyed this book, and I also thought it was very thought-provoking and also a really good book, which are three different things, because you can enjoy something and it still not be very good. But I actually think this was well written, well thought out. It was doing a lot of things at the same time. It's sort of the classic how you think of Heinlein as a guy who's thought through. He's very willing to go completely off the deep end in terms of where his like extrapolations of thought take him. And this book was wonderful because he went completely off the deep end with regard to, engineering extrapolations and science extrapolations and sociological extrapolations. And it all ends up very fun and entertaining and thought-provoking.
Yeah. I mostly agree with you. I think this was a very thought-provoking, interesting book that I don't know if I enjoyed reading. It is definitely written as if it is kind of like a historical account of a revolution. So the book is very dry. The characters, the focus of the book is not really on the characters. There is some character work, but our main character is just kind of a stand-in for like an everyman. He doesn't have a lot of characteristics, and the ones that he does are not really focused on very much. But I think that this book really made me think, and I think the thing that Heinlein does that you mentioned that is really great is he doesn't want to tell you everything, and he kind of there's a lot of very interesting things and some problematic things in this, but the book isn't clear about and intentionally not clear about, is this Heinlein's judgment of this thing? Is he supporting this thing? Is this character a surrogate for him, or is this an example of something that he doesn't fully agree with? And he kind of leaves that up to interpretation, and I enjoy that, and I think it makes for a great conversation, because I think there's a lot to pick apart here and kind of delve into and see what we think the book is saying and what we took from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Sergei is saying something similar, that there's, on the one hand, you can view like the story as it's interesting because I think there's even more to it than this, but they say you can view the story as an in-universe piece of propaganda aimed at future generations, but also it could just be that he doesn't know how to write humans, which is funny. and I think we'll definitely get into Heinlein and how he sort of views human nature. But I think it could also be viewed as propaganda aimed at actual future generations on Earth, because like he puts some arguments in characters' mouths for certain positions that are fairly convincing as they're conveyed in the story. So I think that's cool.
Yeah, and there's a lot of U.S. Revolutionary War direct and indirect pulls and references and quotes, and it is very much, I think, kind of designed to trigger memories in Americans reading this book. They're like, yeah, that's very similar to our thing. I wonder if our revolution was as neat and tidy as we think it was, or if it was more like this thing. I like all that stuff, and I think we're going to get into some of that as we go.
Yeah, Vale says, it felt to me like he was trying to espouse a strongly felt set of views about life, liberty, relationships, society that he desperately wishes were true. I think I love that. That's a great way of saying it, and I came away with a very similar feeling that, like, I don't actually think he's right about human nature in a number of places.
Yeah.
But like, I actually think Heinlein is an optimist, despite how cynical things may come off. The fact that he thinks humans can change as much as he portrays them as changing, I think is the sign of an optimist.
Yeah, I like that. Tringard says that overall they liked it, but the end felt abrupt because he was sort of expecting a utopian-like solution to emphasize a thesis. But I could see how it didn't make its thesis very clear. I'm with him on that. I kind of expected the end turn to demonstrate like distinctly whether the way they went about these things was definitely right or definitely wrong. And some of the last lines of the book are, maybe this wasn't worth it. I don't know.
Yeah.
and it's like, which I think is true to human beings, that there's no way we can really know that or not. And I think part of it is probably him wrestling with that idea.
Yeah, I think that's the theme of the book is like, even the instigators of the whole plot they're all doing it for different reasons, and I don't think they're ever sure that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Except maybe, well, yeah, I don't know.
Some of them you're not even sure why they are doing it, like our protagonist.
Yeah, that's great. Let's talk about that when we get to that point, because
sure.
That's a very interesting point.
All right, let's get into the slides then. We will start with the beginning of the book.
Okay, and that is, I see in Lunia Pravda. Okay, by the way, I'm going to be reading this in a terrible Russian accent, just like the audiobook reader. I hope everyone is looking forward to that.
It's like the Irish accent all over again.
This is going to be worse because I'm basing my bad Russian accent off of a bad Russian accent. I see in Lunia Pravda that Luna City Council has passed on first reading a bill to examine, license, inspect, and tax public food vendors operating inside municipal pressure. I see also is to be a mass meeting tonight to organize Sons of Revolution talk. My old man taught me two things: mind own business and always cut cards. Politics never tempted me. But on Monday, 13 May 2075, I was in computer room of Luna Authority Complex, visiting with computer boss Mike, while other machines whispered among themselves. Mike was no official name. I had nicknamed him for Mycroft Holmes in a story written by Dr. Watson before he founded IBM. The story character would just sit and think, and that's what Mike did. Mike was a fair dinkum thinkum, the sharpest computer you'll ever meet. Not fastest. At Bell Labs, Buenos Aires, down Earthside, they've got a thinkum a tenth of his size, which can answer almost before you ask. But matters whether you get correct answer in microsecond rather than millisecond, as long as correct. Not that Mike would necessarily give right answer. He wasn't completely honest.
So yeah, this is the beginning. One of the things that didn't occur to me until I went in to pull these slides is this first paragraph. I see in Luna Aya Pravda is taking place in present time, as far as it is present for the character who's telling a story about this revolution that occurred in his past. And I think, looking back on it, that is fairly obvious, but because you're just being introduced to the world and you don't quite understand what's going on yet, that didn't become apparent to me until I went back and started really studying the book after I finished reading it.
Yeah, I didn't notice that either. That's pretty cool.
And it kind of changes the whole tone of everything too. When you see, like, as you go along, you see, like, I like that the text points out and tax public food vendors, because taxation is one of the things that one of the strong political stances that most of the characters in the book take is against taxation. We've got several slides talking about that as we go along, we set up right beginning here that the free moon colony of the future, in our perspective, is about to pass a tax on public food vendors.
Yeah. This is a pretty great beginning, actually, because one, we established that this whole book is going to be told as a story, like this man is telling a story of his past to you, which, like you point out, we may not catch, but there are a number of points in the book where it's really clear that he's like, that hadn't happened yet. Yeah. You know, it's clear that this is a story being told in the future. Number two, it establishes Manuel as this guy who's all about keeping his head down, minding his own business, just doing his job, and not interested in politics. That is actually kind of who that is his character. That's who he starts out as, and he has to kind of be pulled into it. And it also introduces Mike immediately, and I think that emphasizes how important Mike is to this story, which is something that's easy to forget, I think. The fact that like the story opens up focusing on Mike so much.
Yeah, yeah, and this is Mike is very interesting because when I look at the part that we've pulled out here, and I look at the way this part of the story ends with, not that Mike would necessarily give right answer. He wasn't completely honest. To me, that says we're setting up something with Mike, and that might just be my 30 plus years of reading science fiction stories with AI and how something always bad happens with the AI by the end of the story. And it almost seems to me like that's what we're setting up here, that like we see throughout this book that their reliance on Mike to succeed in their rebellion is almost absolute, to the point where there is 100% no way they would have gotten as far as they did without him. And like you keep seeing this, like the no such thing as a free lunch thing said over and over again, and they're just getting Mike's help for basically nothing, and you just keep waiting. You keep waiting for that turn. You keep waiting for when that's gonna blow up and bite them in the ass, and it never happens. And that's just like, I think if this book was written today, that definitely would have happened.
Yeah, it's really interesting because all Mike asks of them is to like look over the jokes.
Yeah.
Like that's the payment, and they just like so drag their feet and don't really seem to care that much about the jokes. And that's like he basically, you can view Mike as like this desperately lonely child who just loves it when they're paying attention to him. And once they realize how powerful he is, they just exploit his labor, basically.
Yeah.
And sort of abuse him. Actually, it's interesting because he's like this omnipotent god thing, but also all he really wanted was to talk about jokes with them.
Yep. One of the other things I like in this opening section is, I think the most glaring thing about the story is the language of it, right? How these loony characters talk different than we do. They drop certain words and phrases, and I found this very difficult at first, but I was very surprised how quickly into my reading my brain just got used to the missing words, the missing pronouns, the missing articles. Like it just, you just kind of get used to it, and like your brain can read a sentence without those things in it, right? Like there's that famous test where like you drop all the words out of, like you drop certain words out of a sentence and the brain can pick up on all of them because it just automatically inserts them in your head while you're reading.
Right.
That's kind of what happened. But
yeah,
I do think it's cool that these opening paragraphs kind of teach you, because the books have to teach you. This is something we always talk about. Books have to teach you how to read them. And we open this and we have Manuel talking, using like popular phrases like mind own business. And I think that's like teaching you, okay, the way they talk here, they're going to be dropping certain pronouns. They're going to be dropping certain articles. And like, so we'll use popular, well-known phrases to kind of lull you into that understanding. And I think that's a really clever way of doing it that Heinlein did.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed that because it's also just a fun kind of science fiction idea that this moon colony, what they speak is a pidgin, where it's English, and this guy, like it's really interesting to think about because Manuel is a third generation Moonie. He speaks English, but it's a pidgin English with butchered syntax and a lot of loan words from other languages. I mean, the audiobook reader chose a Russian accent because that kind of fits with the dropped articles and such. But but there's,
plus they
but
just
like
use a lot of Russian phrases.
Yeah, but like it's not just like, oh, he's a Russian guy speaking English. No, that's absolutely not what this is. This is his native tongue. He just like this is the tongue of the moon now. And I think that's kind of awesome.
Yeah. Vale says something cool here. He wrote this book when the Red Scare was a huge topic. America was a rough place. The social pro-communist tone of his work, anti-authoritarian, was incredibly brave to write. It was also a time when religion and family were very different than today, that's very true. One of the things I think we're going to have to remind ourselves again and again is the date in which this was written, for how the book handles sexism, how the book handles politics, all these things. We have to constantly be aware of the time that the book was written, because that's relevant.
Yeah, definitely. I should have paid more attention to that, actually.
And Johnsay says that he doesn't think Heinlein was advocating for political positions in the book so much as presenting or exploring. Starship Troopers has a similar propaganda feeling, but for very different politics. And that's very true, and that's one of the things I was struggling with, because the only other book that I've read of Heinlein's is Starship Troopers. And that book is absolutely, like, fascist propaganda like crazy. And I think I think it says something to his skill as a writer that he can write from the perspective of, we're trying to convince you that this form of government, that this political system, that this way of doing things is the right one, without him really even saying he supports it or not. Like, that he can do a similar convincing thing for fascism and libertarianism in two different novels, I think is the strength of his writing.
Yeah, this really makes me want to go read Starship Troopers just to fully understand that, because I haven't read that one yet.
It's been so long for me. I wish I had time to read it again before the book club, but I just ran out of time. But yeah. I think I'm going to go back and revisit that one.
Vale also points out that, talking about something like Mike in 1966 is very insightful. I will definitely talk a lot about Mike, and I agree. I mean, I'm someone who loves AI stories and thinks a lot about AI, and I was kind of blown away by how he handles the AI element in this story, because I was expecting to have to like roll my eyes at like, okay, he's gonna mess this up, and I'm gonna have to suspend my disbelief to accept that there's an AI in this story that doesn't just immediately like turn the story into something else. And he actually, as far as I'm concerned, incorporated Mike into the story perfectly. And we'll talk about how exactly, I think, when we get to Mike.
Yeah. But for now, let's meet Wyoming. "Want you to meet a nice little girl," said Shorty. She was little only to Shorty. I'm not short, 175 centimeters. But she was taller, 180, I learned later, and amassed 70 kilos, all curves and as blonde as Shorty was black. I decided she must be transportee, since colors rarely stay that clear past first generation. Pleasant face, quite pretty, and mop of yellow curls topped off that long, blonde, solid, lovely structure. I stopped 3 paces away to look at her up and down and whistle. She held her pose, then nodded to thank me, but abruptly, bored with compliments, no doubt. Shorty waited till formality was over, then said softly, "Wyo, this is Comrade Manny, best drillman that ever drifted a tunnel. Manny, this little girl is Wyoming Knot, and she came all the way from Plato to tell us how we're doing in Hong Kong. Wasn't that sweet of her? She touched hands with me. Call me Y, Manny, but don't say why not." So this is Wyo. This is the first woman we meet in this story, and we automatically see some interesting traditions at how the men handle women in this. There's a very clear formal structure when you see a woman that you are supposed to undress them with your eyes, look them up and down, and whistle at them. Things that in our society are generally considered super rude things to do. Is part of it. Specifically says here, this is a formality. This is something we do. It's the equivalent of like shaking hands.
Yeah, and also that she considers the catcalling to be a compliment. Like she's right. Not she may be bored with it, but she's not insulted by it.
Right.
So this is amazing how he does this, because or like the courage required to do it. Perhaps I don't know exactly how I want to frame it, but like and by he I mean Heinlein. He front loads this book with a lot of material like this, where you're just like, oh my God, are we doing this? This is unbelievably crass, and I can't believe we're going here. And then it isn't until much later in the book that he justifies why these customs exist in a way that is very coherent as a science fiction kind of explanation.
Yeah. It is very much a 2018, oh, my feathers are getting ruffled thing as you go through a lot of the interactions with women very early in this book. But I do like, you got to wonder, I mean, 1966 was, there was a pretty large feminist movement spinning up. Mm-hmm. And I wish I had gone back and seen what some reviews were of the book at the time, where if they appreciated, because just like Starship Troopers, the way Heinlein deals with women is very fascinating. There are there are moments where this society and in Starship Troopers where they treat them as 100% totally equal, but there are also deeply troubling things in here, and we'll get into this more as we learn more of why women are treated like this way in this society. But it's very interesting, and you do run the risk of demonstrating being interpreted as advocating, which again I don't think what Heinlein is doing at all.
Yeah, it's fascinating because you can interpret his works as either extremely hyper progressive, almost beyond the present day, or as weirdly regressive. And I think like you can make arguments for both readings, which is kind of amazing. Like it's an amazing sentence to say you can interpret this as either super progressive or regressive,
Yeah.
depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, and I think like anything, it's probably somewhere in the middle. I think there are progressive ideas told from the lens of someone that existed as a dude in the 60s. So like there are definitely some progressive ideas in here mixed in some of the institutional sexism of the time. And I think that's interesting to parse, at least.
Yeah. All right, moving on to the next section. This is where Manny finally tells Wyo about Mike after they've gotten to know each other a little bit better. Soon she said, "Manny, you're telling me this computer is alive?" "What do you mean?" I answered. "He doesn't sweat or go to the WC, but can think and talk, and he's aware of himself. Is he alive?" "I'm not sure what I mean by alive," she admitted. "There's a scientific definition, isn't there? Irritability or some such, and reproduction. Mike is irritable and can be irritating. As for reproducing, not designed for it, but yes, given time and materials and very special help, Mike could reproduce himself." "I need very special help too," Wyo answered, "since I'm sterile. And it takes me 10 whole lunars and many kilograms of the best materials. But I make good babies. Manny, why shouldn't a machine be alive? I've always felt they were. Some of them wait for a chance to savage you in a tender spot. Mike wouldn't do that, not on purpose, no meanness in him. But he likes to play jokes, and one might go wrong, like a puppy who doesn't know he's biting. He's ignorant. No, not ignorant. He knows enormously more than I, or you, or any man who ever lived. Yet he doesn't know anything." "Better repeat that. I missed something." I tried to explain. How Mike knew almost every book in Luna, could read at least 1,000 times as fast as we, and never forgot anything unless he chose to erase. How he could reason with perfect logic and make shrewd guesses with insufficient data, and yet not know anything about how to be alive. She interrupted. "I scan it. You're saying he's smart and knows a lot, but is not sophisticated. Like a new chum when he grounds on the rock. Back Earthside he might be a professor with a string of degrees, but here he's a baby."
Yeah, so let's talk about Mike for a little bit.
Yeah.
Because obviously he's one of our 4 main characters in the story, and he is the reason why anyone sees any success here. And he's a very complex, deep, kind of fascinating character. And I find, like we were talking about before, I find Heinlein's depiction of advanced technology to be kind of amazingly prescient at times. Like there are like parts of the computer stuff that is dated, right? Like they just kind of extrapolated out what a computer was in the 60s, and it would be just that but more powerful. So how you program it, the fact that there would only be one computer kind of running everything, this idea of a mainframe system, which really it doesn't exist anymore. But the intelligence and the way the computer like reasons and understands and learns is very is kind of very modern in how we think of AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was kind of immediately taken into the like his understanding of computers is quite valid, despite the fact that it's an old-fashioned way of thinking about it. Like you have to program it at the terminal and all that. It's like, yeah, well, I mean, obviously we still program computers, but we think about it differently. But what struck me was like, yeah, if you have this computer and it's in these large pieces of hardware and they're on the moon and it's basically being portrayed as like significantly above human level, but probably not the sort of like God thing that may exist, in the far future or exists in various other sci-fi, then you actually have it in that narrow band where it can't just explode away in intelligence. It's just going to exist at its current state of intelligence, and it's kind of be stuck there. And that actually allows the story to progress without the story being completely derailed and turning into like a oh, the AI is trying to take over the world type story.
Yeah, yeah. And it Mike kind of I think it's interesting how as the story progresses, Mike starts as like the center of it. He is kind of the reason why all this happens, and it's because of his projections that they even undertake this mission. But as the revolution goes on, Mike kind of fades more and more and more to the background, and I think that's very intentional. The story moves away from him, even though he is relied on more and more and more. And it is kind of sad in a way, because here's this section here where they're talking about they're basically having this conversation that rests on he's as alive as you or I are. I love the comparison between Yo, who is unable to have children without special help, and this reproduction thing that the deciding factor of life is whether or not you can reproduce. And it's like, well, I can with help. Well, so can Mike. And I love that they draw that comparison.
Yeah. Also, kind of shortly after this point, there's that scene where they're telling jokes and that they're evaluating the jokes by the type of humor.
Yeah.
And Yo comes to the conclusion that this proves, like, based on the ones that Mike finds funny, this proves that Mike is a woman or a girl.
Yeah.
Which is great and humanizes Mike even more at that point and makes you like Mike even more. And I think another moment that really kind of jumps into my mind as we're talking about this is, you know, he takes on the persona of this like suave and worldly business leader, Mike does, and everyone buys it and thinks he's this great leader. And then Mike just casually discards that mask like it's meaningless when it becomes convenient, and makes you realize that he didn't like you kind of thought like, oh well, Mike's becoming that character, and it's like, no, Mike was never cared about that mask. Mike is always Mike, and he still just wants to talk with Manny like the whole book. He just wants to be Manny's friend.
Right.
He cares about this revolution stuff much less than just like chatting with Manny, and it's very endearing.
I thought the way he talked to Manny was a really like small clever thing Heinlein did, because he says he always calls him, he's the only one that calls him man. Everyone else calls him Manny or Manuel, or later General and all this stuff, but the only person that calls him man is Mike. And I love this idea that the computer is talking to Manny and saying, yes man, like yes computer, yes human, and like it's a very clever little thing that he did, and it kind of shows that if Mike is the idea of artificial intelligence, then Manny is humanity, like is the stand-in for normal humans.
Yeah. I thought the same thing, actually. I thought that was great.
It's like little things that an author can do that you might like, because I remember the first time I read that, I thought that's what he was saying, is like, hello Mike, hello man, and like human. Like, so a woman would walk in and he'd go, hello, woman. But no, that's like just what he calls
his
him.
Nickname,
Yeah. All right. So moving on, now we go to how Manny finds himself swept up into this whole thing. Presently, I said, look at base sketch. Each vertex of triangle shares self with 0, 1, or 2 other triangles. Where shares one, that its link, one direction or both. But one is enough for multiple redundant communication net. On corners where sharing is 0, it jumps to right to next corner. Where sharing is double, choice is again right-handed. Now work it with people. Take 4th level, D for dog. This vertex is Comrade Dan. Now let's get down 1 level to show 3 levels of communication knocked out. Level E for easy, and pick up Comrade Egbert. Egbert works under Donald, has cellmates Edward and Elmer, and has 3 under him, Frank, Fred, and Fatso, but knows how to send message to Ezra on his own level, but not in his cell. He doesn't know Ezra's name, face, address, or anything, but he has his way, phone number probably, to reach Ezra in an emergency. Now watch it work. Casimir, 3 level 3, finks out and betrays Charlie and Cox in his cell, Baker above him, and Donald, Dan, and Dick in subcell, which isolates Egbert, Edward, and Elmer, and everybody under them. And this goes on for like another 2 pages. Like, I'm just talking about all this.
Yeah.
Wyo was tracing out lines, convincing herself it would work, which it would, was idiot circuit. Let Mike study a few milliseconds and could produce a better, safer, more foolproof hookup, and probably, certainly, ways to avoid betrayal while speeding up routings. But I'm not a computer. Prof was staring with blank expression. What's trouble, I said. It'll work. This is my pigeon. Manuel, Signor O'Kelly, will you head this revolution? Me? Great bog, niet. I'm no lost-cause martyr, just talking about circuits. Wyo looked up. Manny, she said soberly, you're opted. It's settled. So, this is Manny, and this is like I think this is the reason I pulled this, and the reason I pulled so much of the circuitry talk and the cell talk, besides the fact that it's just blockchain. It's just Heinlein. It's just a blockchain. But anyway, this is what Manny cares about. Manny is a problem solver. He likes to see difficult problems and he likes to solve them. And that is kind of how he gets swept up into this whole thing is, oh, here's a problem. I can solve this for you. Okay, you need to lead us because that's brilliant. He's like, wait, nope, sorry, you're doing it now. And that's why he's in this whole thing. I mean, that is really what pulls him into this whole thing is because they can always distract him by giving him another problem to solve, and he'll run off and do it, and then finds himself suddenly prime minister of the moon.
Yeah, it's interesting because he kind of has this in common with Mike, actually, that he kind of just wants to be helpful, and just inevitably ends up helping everyone and solving their problems and being put in charge of more and more things. And the other way in which he's like Mike is that he's very capable. He's very intelligent, but he doesn't make a big deal out of the fact that he is.
Yeah.
And he's just sort of the, like, I guess I haven't read that many books by Heinlein, but there is this stereotype of like the Heinlein hyper competent protagonist, which I guess this guy is, even though he's so humble that he doesn't come off like it's never irritating. Like, you never really notice like, hey, this guy can do it all, can't he? But like, kind of, he can't really, like, he's not the best at actual like politicking, but he does okay at it, I guess.
Yeah. He's good at what he does, and that's what he's concerned with. And it is like, I think because the book positions him in this place where a guy who's just really good at what he does and likes solving problems and wants to be helpful, it kind of shows how a person like that could get swept up into the momentum of these kind of things without fully being aware of it. Because again, the interesting thing about the story is it's told from the future looking back on it. So we are from the perspective of Manny in the future, having gone through all this stuff. So he is aware of his involvement in this thing. I wonder if this book was told from his perspective in the moment, whether he would be as conscious of how much into this thing he was getting as we see in the text here.
Yeah. Well, as far as I remember, there's actually no moment where Manuel is like, and that was the moment I realized that I was in this revolution. Like, he just kind of, if there is a moment, it's when Mike does the calculation and is like, yeah, the moon will be completely out of food and you'll be, eating each other in like 10 years or some very short time frame. And that's when they all realize how serious it is. But Manuel is never like, okay, that changed my mind. He just like he just goes on with it very organically. Yeah. Like, well, obviously, I guess,
But even that, he's not convinced to help out until he gets the odds that are favorable enough for him to get in. Like, it's still, like, just the fact that, hey, you're going to be dead in 10 years is not enough for him to pull the trigger and go in. It's only when he believes it doable, when it's a problem that he believes to be solvable, is when he gets into it.
Yeah, that's right. All right.
It's time to learn Prof's political beliefs, Matt.
So yeah, so Prof is a very interesting character, and I guess this is our excuse to talk about Prof and his description of himself as a rational anarchist. But Professor, what are your political beliefs? I'm a rational anarchist. I don't know that brand. Anarchist individualist, anarchist communist, anarchist Christian anarchist. Philosophical anarchist, syndicalist, libertarian, those I know. But what's this? Randite? I can get along with a Randite. A rational anarchist believes that concepts such as state and society and government have no existence save as physically exemplified in the acts of self-responsible individuals. He believes that it is possible to impossible to shift blame, share blame, distribute blame, as blame, guilt, responsibility are matters taking place inside human beings singly and nowhere else. But being rational, he knows that not all individuals hold his evaluations, and he tries to live perfectly in an imperfect world, aware that his effort will be less than perfect, yet undismayed by self-knowledge of self-failure. Professor, I can understand you. I don't insist that you call it government. I just want you to state what rules you think are necessary to ensure freedom, equal freedom for all. Dear lady, I'll happily accept your rules. But you don't seem to want any rules. True, but I will accept any rules that you feel necessary to your freedom. I am free, no matter what rules surround me. If I find them tolerable, I tolerate them. If I find them too obnoxious, I break them. I am free because I know that I alone am morally responsible for everything I do. You would not abide by a law that the majority felt was necessary? Tell me the law, dear lady, and I will tell you whether I will obey it.
So, Matt, what do you think about rational anarchy?
Well, when you hear Prof describe it, it sounds like a pretty good deal. This is the kind of thing that makes me wonder if Heinlein is actively challenging himself to just like take on roles and have characters and be like, all right, my mission with this character is to convince you that they're right, regardless of what I, Robert Heinlein, believe. Because he does a really good job. Like I have certain sympathies for the libertarian slant of like everyone should be responsible for themselves, but like it's a complicated world, so like you can always. I find this to be a very compelling sales pitch. I'll say that. Yeah, like I think it's I think this character comes across as a very believable character in the sense that he's convicted in his own beliefs and he actually lives by them pretty well in the book.
Well, he's built as if like he's the martyr of the book. He's the great hero of this rebellion. So he's kind of constructed through the story as guy who was perfect and did everything and it was all his idea and his planning, and he always seems like he's the one that knows what to do. So when you frame him that way, any argument he makes is kind of framed by the book as the correct argument. And I think the book kind of subtly disputes that through his behavior, because on the one hand, he is very much like he talks one way, but he behaves in other ways. And I guess it technically lines up. I guess there's I guess it technically lines up that he just does whatever he wants because he knows I'm only responsible to myself, and so I'm going to do whatever I want. And if people don't like that, well, that's their problem. But he definitely like speaks differently to different people. And I think later in a slide we're going to see Manny call him a hypocrite, which he basically says, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and the problem with this philosophy is that there's really no like grounding to it. Like you said, you could just be a horrible person and live by this code, and because it's really no code at all. It's just like
right. That's what that's anarchy. Yeah, there's like it's nothing.
Yeah, to the extent that that he's actually taking a stand on anything, it's that he would never blame someone for something, I guess, which is pretty weak sauce, I guess.
Yeah, and I do think it is very easy to look at something like this and read this and say, yeah, that's what Heinlein is saying. This is what he believes. This is his political belief. Look, he has one of his characters in his book spouting this stuff and framing it as if it is the correct argument. But I think it is absolutely more complicated than that, and I find that fascinating.
Yeah, I actually kind of want to walk back what I said a second ago, where I said like Prof manages to live his philosophy, because I agree that he comes across as a little bit sneaky in more than a few places in this book, and because you're on Manny's side and you're in Manny's head, you always give Prof the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah,
and I think there's definitely a case to be made that Prof is not this like flawless thinker. That if anything, he's just like like you could make the what's the word, the like sort of the adversarial reading where Prof is actually like the worst kind of person. Like he's someone who's just smart enough to be dangerous, but not smart enough to rein in his impulses. And he wants to kick the ant nest. He wants to cause a revolution. He wants to be in the spotlight and just doing things, shaking things up.
Yeah.
And again, he's clever enough and knowledgeable enough to actually be successful at it. And that's like the worst kind of person. Like that's the kind of person who you know, destroys the Soviet or destroys Russia and turns it into a you know, a nightmare place,
Right.
for example.
Right, because he uses the idea of this oncoming lunar apocalypse to motivate other people, but it's never quite clear what his motivation is outside of, I don't like government and I want it to go away, and I'm going to position myself to be in a place of power to where I can make government go away. And even like we had to cut off this section, but right after this he says to the group, isn't it enough that I just want the Lunar Authority to go away? Isn't that just enough for you right now? And they're like, yeah, that's good for us. That's what we want too. But there's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot more that what he wants to accomplish. And part of that, like, Heinlein doesn't show us a lot of that directly because Manny isn't party to so much of it. He learns about so much of it after the fact. And he's like, no, you don't understand. I couldn't tell you about this. And he's like lying. There's like deceit everywhere.
Yeah. And I think the fact that later on they offer Prof the leadership, like the French guy, I believe, kind of threatens to make Prof the king of the moon, right?
Yeah.
Am I getting that right? Yeah. And Prof is genuinely like horrified at this idea, and I think it's kind of reminds me of the Dark Knight Joker, where it's like, yeah, no, he really doesn't actually want to be in charge. He just wants to burn it all down, and that's not very admirable, I think.
Or, I mean, but you could argue there's one side of Prof that's just feigning, like he's horrified by the idea. Because he was horrified by the idea of being made the prime minister. He's like, no, you can't. No, I don't. No, I don't want that. All right, fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's worth thinking about.
Yeah. All right, and now we are getting into the beginning of the revolution here. Followed a long time during which would have been possible to forget anything as unlikely as revolution had not details taken so much time. Our first purpose was not to be noticed. Long-distance purpose was to make things much worse as possible. Yes, worse. Never was a time, even at last, when all loonies wanted to throw off authority, wanted it bad enough to revolt. All loonies despised Warden and cheated authority. Didn't mean they were ready to fight and die. If you had mentioned patriotism to a loony, he would have stared, or thought you were talking about his homeland, were transported Frenchmen whose arts belonged to La Belle Patrie, ex-Germans loyal to Vaterland, Ruskies who still loved Holy Mother Russia. But Luna? Luna was the rock, place of exile, nothing to love. We were as non-political as people as history ever produced. I know it. I was numb to politics as any other until circumstance pitched it to me. Wyoming was in it because she hated authority for a personal reason. Prof because he despised all authority in a detached intellectual fashion. Mike because he was a bored and lonely machine and was for him only game in town. You could not have accused us of patriotism. I came closest because I was third generation, with total lack of affection for any place on Terra, had been there, disliked it, and despised earthworms. Made me more patriotic than most. Average loony was interested in beer, betting, women, and work, in that order. Women might be second place, but first was unlikely, much as women were cherished. Loonies had learned there never was enough women to go around. Slow learners died, and even most possessive male can't stay alert every minute. As Prof says, a society adapts to fact, or doesn't survive. Loonies adapted to harsh facts, or failed and died. But patriotism was not necessary to survival. So, this I pulled this because this kind of outlines all of our characters and from Manny's perspective, why they are involved in this thing. And it's none of them are like for freedom, for to move, to get rid of the chains of tyranny, for this noble grand cause that when we look back at the revolutions of our past, we look and see that there was this moral crusade to end tyranny and to bring freedom to the people. No, not these guys. And patriotism in itself is just a means to an end. It is something we must create in people by forcing hardship on them.
Yeah, and you may have pointed this out previously, but like I think there's a very subtle point to be made where he's making a lot of references to the American Revolution in a lot of places, and you have to wonder if there was really that much of a sentiment of American patriotism at the time, or if that's not something that we've sort of agreed on as part of the national narrative, but may not have actually been true.
Yeah, yeah.
Because again, there were a lot of pragmatic, short-term political or economic reasons to be all in on American independence that were not just like freedom from tyranny and declarations of libertarian conviction.
Yeah, and I bet early American colonists, if you said, "Are you a patriot?" they would be like, "Oh, to England or to France? Yeah, I'm a patriot." And I think it's so clever here. Like, he could have in this part said, transported from America or North America, whatever the U.S. of, I forget what it's called, but he specifically said from European countries, right? So I think there's so many American Revolution parallels. And actually, Locally Unseen in the chat says, do you think we're supposed to read Prof the George Washington way, where he's noble because he denies the power? See, Prof is very educated, and Prof references the American Revolution over and over again. So I think Prof wants you to read him that way. I think Prof wants you to read him as he's channeling the George Washington abdication of power thing. Whether the book wants you to be like keenly aware of if that's not entirely the truth or not, that's a debate. I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say George Washington was also like a badass who took on personal risks, but Prof actually does take on personal risks because it seems more likely than not that he should have died on the trip to Earth. Yeah. So he's definitely not a coward, but I think he just wants to make his mark.
And I think we might be being a little harsh to him, because I mean, I think he cares deeply about things in this. It's just the way he goes about some of this is very subject to a fine-tooth comb.
I do feel like the book is begging us to criticize him because the book presents him so uncritically.
Yeah,
it's a bit perverse maybe, but like the book it paints him like Manuel never really criticizes him, but there's so much that he does where you can be like, I don't know about that, and that's all in there on purpose. I'm really pretty sure that Heinlein crafted him this way on purpose.
Yeah.
There's go ahead.
So what do you feel about this idea that so at this point in the book we know that the moon is on its way to crisis? Like, if things continue the way they are, I think it's 10 years down the road, there's not going to be any food. The people will start dying. There could be everyone on the moon could end up dead. So they basically have no choice but to, in their minds, but to mislead the public and kind of manipulate them into this false sense of patriotism in order to push them towards a revolution that might be their only way to save them. And I think that's interesting because this is a book that talks so much about personal choice, personal freedom, personal wants and needs, and this committee is basically acting in their mind in the best interest of the people, and they will deceive the people, manipulate the people, lie to the people, push the people, sacrifice the people in their best interest while still claiming it's for their freedom. And I find that contradiction inherently fascinating. Absolutely.
And also I kind of want to say this, it's a timely book to be reading right now, but I think in truth you could say that about this book at any time since it was written, because this has been a century of like political trickery, basically. Like every side is always trying to motivate their target demographic, whatever that is, to basically become soldiers for their side using whatever arguments they have to, because they always reason that their cause is the just cause. Their cause is the equivalent of the moon is going to run out of food in 10 years. And so anything that we do in support of our cause is justified, including lying and manipulating. And I think it's just a very kind of fascinating abstract take on revolutions and how revolutions work, because in order to entice a population to revolution, it's very, like, people are not rational enough really as a as a mob for you to be able to explain to them the rational reasons why they should all agree to do a revolution. You have to employ manipulation to get a population to revolt, and that's both true and horrifying and worth thinking about.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that's why I find this book, even though I thought it was a little dry and a little dull to me at times, it's these things, thinking about these things and thinking about what this reflects on our country and humanity as a whole, I think is endlessly fascinating.
Yeah. There's one more thing on this slide I wanted to talk about, which is this beat of the moon being a harsh mistress. The book is titled after this idea that the moon is a very difficult place to live, and it creates a harsher culture. And one thing I was just Googling this just now. This book came out in 1966. Dune came out in 1965. And Dune is a book where one of the major themes of this book is that there's this planet, this extremely inhospitable desert planet, where people have been living for probably thousands of years and created their own very hardy desert warrior culture, basically. And the theme of the book is that a people will adapt to their circumstances. And you could have called that book Dune is a Harsh Mistress, and it would have been fine. And I think that's a cool theme. He definitely, I like how granular he is with it in this book, where he'll take a given sort of stimulus imposed by the moon and extrapolate, okay, what would that sort of restriction cause to happen to the sociology of the people living there?
Yeah, which is a great transition, Matt, to the next slide. Well done. Because we're going to learn about women.
Yeah, we're going to learn about why things are the way they are. So this is right after Stu, the visiting Frenchman tourist, has committed a terrible faux pas bordering on a crime by touching a woman against her wishes, which is a much bigger deal than he realizes. And even the reader at that point is a little bit confused about what's going on exactly.
Yeah.
So he's explaining why this was such a big deal. Certainly. It's so simple that once you understand, you'll never be in danger from it again. Here we are, 2 million males, less than 1 million females. A physical fact, basic as rock or vacuum. Then add idea of Tannstaffel. When thing is scarce, price goes up. Women are scarce, aren't enough to go around. That makes them most valuable thing in Luna, more precious than ice or air, as men without women don't care whether they stay alive or not. Except a cyborg, if you regard him as a man, which I don't. I went on. So what happens? And mind you, things were even worse when this custom or natural law first showed itself back in 20th century. Ratio was 10 to 1 or worse then. One thing is what always happens in prisons. Men turn to other men. That helps not much. Problem still is because most men want women and won't settle for substitute while chance of getting true gelt. They get so anxious they will kill for it, and from stories old-timers was killing enough to chill your teeth in those days. But after a while, those still alive find a way to get along, things shake down, as automatic as gravitation. Those who adjust to facts stay alive, those who don't are dead and no problem. What this means here and now is that women are scarce in Khartoum, and you are surrounded by 2 million men who see to it you dance to that tune. You have no choice. She has all choice. She can hit you so hard it draws blood. You dasn't lay a finger on her. Look, you put my arm around Tish, maybe tried to kiss her. Suppose instead she had gone to a hotel room with you. What would happen? Heavens, I suppose they would have torn me to pieces. They would have done nothing, shrugged and pretended not to see, because choice is hers, not yours, not theirs, exclusively hers.
So, let's talk about this for a bit. So, in this world, women are in charge, basically.
Especially when it comes to sexuality.
Yeah, but I think only when it comes to sexuality.
I think there's no evidence that there's any kind of actual equality. It's more like just the norm of sexuality now is that men are to be so ostentatiously hands off that any degree of unwanted attention, unwanted touching, is grounds for like a savage beating, and that the other men are the ones who will enforce this because of the market dynamics, basically.
Yeah. But that's fascinating to me. It is a logical, though I believe unrealistic interpretation of what this would look like.
I had the same thought, that it would be much worse.
Yeah. I just don't buy that, like, we would just naturally fall into this equilibrium where, like, oh, well, we treat all women as saints now and nobody abuses women at all in this world. That's a wonderful thought that I just don't think would be accurate to human nature at all.
Yeah.
But that's the most interesting thing to me. This is that it is kind of a sexual empowerment of women, but everywhere else in the book, women are not empowered. Like, we see very few, if any, women in political positions. Wyo is really the only one, but Wyo is kind of delegated away to nothingness in this book. Like, she's one of the original founding members, but what does she do for the revolution? Can you name a specific thing she does to aid the revolution along?
No, not really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Vale points out that, like, at the time this was written, that maybe this was a lot closer to equality than things were at the time. But definitely today, you look at this and you immediately see, like, why wasn't Prof a woman?
Yeah.
Prof could have been a woman.
Why
right?
wasn't Mike a woman? Like, they even said that Mike. There's even the whole part was like, actually, based on his personality, Mike's closer to a woman. But then when Mike creates these fake personas to like spread propaganda and become the de facto leader, they're all men.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, I think Manuel is actually unconsciously sexist, but thinks that he's not, because of kind of how the moon is set up, and also no one thinks they're sexist, really.
Yeah, of course.
Which is another thing you could look at, like, in terms of unreliable narrator, maybe.
Yeah.
Is just Manuel is like, yeah, of course things are great here, because he is very much a partisan of the moon, and thinks that everything is great there, and that's the obvious right way to do things.
Yeah, and it is so much. I like Vale's comment a lot, because I very much agree that it is really trying to show what equality is, and it puts forth sexual equality or sexual empowerment as the major thing, which kind of makes sense for the 60s. There was a major push in sexual awakening for women at the time, but so many other parts, it's just like, no, like it posits that the head person of his line marriage is the woman. She's the eldest. She's kind of the one that seems to be in charge, but she's also delegated to be the one that stays at home and does the cooking and the cleaning. Like, there's so much, there's where it's progressive in some sense and so regressive in other senses. And I mean, you have to chalk that up to the time. I don't like, a really charitable read of this would be Heinlein was doing this on purpose, but I don't think that's true. I think this is just a mixture of the desire to paint women in a more progressive light while still holding on to a lot of the more traditional sexist, ingrained cultural elements of the time that it was written in.
Yeah, I do like to at least think through the charitable reading of like, okay. Sure. On the one hand, he's portraying his best shot at sexual empowerment, and then he's also portraying characters who think that they're being super fair and equitable to women and aren't actually, which is a very realistic human thing. but I suspect that you're right, and he just didn't realize that's what he was doing.
Vale says it's like an Amish person writing Terminator fan fiction. There just isn't context to really hit the mark. That's great.
Yeah, I like that.
No, that was a very good joke. So the other thing I want to talk about in the slide, because the event that's surrounding this is the trial. So we get to see what the legal system on the moon looks like, which is, I think this is one of these moments where the book almost shows its hand in showing some of the drawbacks of this kind of free society, because this is kind of insane. The idea that a person could come here, not be familiar with the customs. Yes, you should not like touch women that don't want to be touched. Like that's generally in our society, we would agree with that. Like you should not just walk up to a random woman and put your arm around them. True, but that the penalty for this thing is death, and that the legal system works by, is there just a guy that's available to oversee this, and he'll just decide, he'll pay me money, and then he'll just decide, and maybe we'll go get some jurors, maybe not. It depends on what you want. And yeah, so like this I have very little doubt that the intention of the trial was Heinlein to say, okay, so we've seen the good things of the free, open, libertarian society. Here's where it might not be so good. Here's where we might need some structure.
This reminded me of one of my favorite video games of all time, which is Chronicles of Riddick: Escape from Butcher Bay.
The good one.
Where basically it's like this hellhole prison colony, and it reminds you that the moon is a hellhole prison colony that they've just managed to make less of a hellhole over time. But customs like this, where they're basically just like, all right, let's get literally like one extra person who isn't part of this dispute to be the judge, and then we can kill someone based on their verdict. Like that just seems like something that you would do if you were that's just prison justice. That's literally prison justice.
Yeah.
So I like that he didn't water that down. I like that he didn't try to come up with some hyper evolved way of doing that. Like it's still very close to the metal of human nature.
Yeah. And to John Shea's point here that not only is the justice system an evolved form of what a prison justice system would look like, but the gender dynamics could be an evolved form of what a penal colony type system would have. So that is very true.
Yeah, that's another kind of lens you could put on the book is that all of these customs we're seeing are Manuel being the salesman trying to sell this system to us as something that's sane and reasonable, when in fact it's just sort of the tragic inevitability of having all these people crammed in a terribly unpleasant prison.
Yeah. All right, are we ready to move on?
Sure.
Any more you want to talk here?
No.
What is Tish? Because that wasn't the person's name. Did you know what that was?
Where are we?
So they call the woman that Stu wronged Tish, and it seemed like a nickname, and I don't know what that means.
I don't remember.
If anyone knows what that means, let me know. All right, so here we have the signing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th.
Yeah.
Signing of Declaration of Independence, wit as Prof said it would. He sprang it on them at end of long day. Announced a special session after dinner at which Adam Celine would speak. Adam read aloud, discussing each sentence, then read it without stopping, making music of sonorous phrases. People wept. Wyo, seated by me, was one, and I felt like it even though I had read it earlier. Then Adam looked at them and said, "The future is waiting. Mark well what you do," and turned meeting over to Prof, rather than usual chairman. Was 2200, and fight began. Sure. They were in favor of it. News had all day been jammed with what bad boys we were, how we were to be punished, taught a lesson, so forth. Not necessarily to spice it up. Stuff up from Earthside was nasty. Mike merely left out, on other hand, opinions. If ever was a day when Luna felt so unified, it was probably 2nd of July, 2076. So they were going to pass it. Prof knew that before he offered it. And we cut it off here, but the way this kind of draws out is they intentionally extend the deadline and make it seem like it's taking a long time, so people get bored and leave, and then they pack Congress with all their own people, ensuring that it gets passed. And this is the first of our real moments of governmental trickiness in the new government of the moon, starting off, well, with just lies.
Yeah.
And because we're using the Declaration of Independence, because we're using July 4th, because we're very clearly drawing an American parallel to both manipulate the people of Earth in this time, but also us Americans reading this, it makes you wonder what the conversations around the Declaration of Independence were in our life, in our reality. What was there underhanded seediness going on to get to a point where the document that someone writ, like, did Jefferson know that the document he wrote was always going to be the one that passed? Like, did he write it days prior? Like, these are things we probably never will know because it was probably just never written.
Yeah, I mean, in one sense, you can make a cynical interpretation that the Declaration of Independence is this veneer of gentility that was put on this like economic calculation made
Right.
by a bunch of wealthy people.
Yep.
I think it's complex, but I think there's certainly some truth to that. Speaking of the American Revolution and its causes, segueing into the next slide. So Manny is now on Earth making a no taxation without representation argument to some reporters, and this is the kind of thing that I love about this book, honestly. Like that he's clearly putting words in the mouth of his characters, but also you're like, I like the way this is put. So a reporter is hassling him, and then we have Manny. I wanted to tell him to blow it. The prophet had again made me take a tranquilizer and had required me to swat that endless list of answers to trick questions. Let's take that one at a time, I said. First, what is it you pay taxes for? Tell me what I get, and perhaps I'll buy it. No, put it this way. Do you pay taxes? Certainly I do, and so should you. And what do you get for your taxes? Huh? Taxes paid for government. I said, excuse me, I'm ignorant. I've lived my whole life in Luna. I don't know much about your government. Can you feed it to me in small pieces? What do you get for your money? They all got interested in anything this aggressive little choom missed, others supplied. I kept list. When they stopped, I read it back. Free hospitals? Aren't any on Luna. Medical insurance? We have, but apparently not what you mean by it. If a person wants insurance, he goes to a bookie and works out a bet. You can hedge anything for a price. I don't hedge my health. I'm healthy. Or was till I came here. We have a public library. One Carnegie Foundation started with a few book films. It gets along by charging fees. Public roads. I suppose that'll be our tubes, but they are no more free than air is free. Oh, sorry, you have free air here, don't you? I mean, our tubes were built by companies who put up money and are downright nasty about expecting it back when and then some. Public schools? There are schools in all Warrens, and I never heard of them turning away pupils, but so I guess they are public. But they pay well, too, because anyone on Luna who knows anything useful is willing to teach it. Charges all the traffic will bear.
It's hard to read these because it's
Yeah.
so that's and it goes on from there. We cut it here, but he goes on to argue basically every other service that's provided by the government that they are not getting provided for, yet are being told they should pay taxes for.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like it's funny. My first read through, like there's obvious United States Revolution parallels here, but it wasn't until I started pulling thing and studying the book that I really saw how like much Heinlein was beating us over the head with this. And I think it's so clever because like it's almost demanding you to it's assailing you with the stuff that seems on the one hand logical, on the other hand the seediness behind it. Like we have here Manny make this wonderful argument, but we preface that wonderful argument with prof had fed me a tranquilizer and gave me the speech I was supposed to say here. So he's really just reading off of a script here. So like we keep every time we have this moment of real like honest like logical argument, we mix in the shadiness and the falseness that's behind it. And I really think it's challenging us with all these American Revolution parables or parallels to say, geez, like what is the foundation of our country? What is the foundation of this whole thing? How much of the story of revolution, the story of country and freedom and rebellion against tyranny is just bullshit.
Yeah, I definitely think he's doing that a lot. But I also think in this particular scene, he's set up this reporter as a punching bag to make his point, which is that I think most like real Americans will answer, you know, especially if you're on the taxes are good side, more prone to saying things like taxes pay for government, and then you get down to like, okay, what does that mean? And then you start listing things, but it's setting up it's almost to the point of setting up a straw man, because any real person will be able to easily say like, yeah, taxes pay for roads, you know, like they pay for services that we actually use, and they may pay for other things that we wish we didn't have to pay for, and that's where we have to have the argument. But this is the kind of thing where it completely makes sense in the story as, oh, we're having a discussion about whether people on the moon should have to pay taxes for things they don't get, but also we're challenging you to inspect your concept of taxation and almost see it with fresh eyes. Like, you know, you see it when you see a thing with fresh eyes, you're able to be like, oh, I've been used to the idea of taxes for so long that I forgot to even think about what it was as a concept, and that's what's fun about it, I think.
Yeah, I do think that I fall back on the Aaron Sorkin adage, which is, if you really believe in the strength of your argument, then you don't need to construct the punching bag to go up against that argument. You can actually show a well-formatted argument against yours and have faith that the thing you believe in will win out. And that's what Sorkin did all throughout The West Wing. He's very much a left-leaning Democrat, but he would constantly bring up good points on the other side and then refute them. This definitely does not do that.
Yeah. But yeah, that's some of the stuff that I like.
Which is why it feels propaganda-y, right? Like that's why it gets that feeling, because like it's so transparent in this is the right way, because we don't really bother to construct the argument against it.
And the way he set it up, there legitimately is no like rational case for taxing the loonies.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like so Manuel just gets to win that argument.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so the Lunar Authority then rejects everything that they wanted, and this is their rejection of it. Our preposterous claims were rejected. Lunar Authority's sacred trust could not be abandoned. Disorders on Earth's moon could not be tolerated. Moreover, recent disorders showed that the authority had been too lenient. Omission was now to be corrected by an activist program, a 5-year plan in which all phases of life in authority's trusteeship would be overhauled. A code of laws was being drafted. Civil and criminal courts would be instituted for benefit of client employees, which meant all persons in trust area, not just co-signees with uncompleted sentences. Public schools would be established, plus indoctrinal adult schools for client employees in need of same. An economic, engineering, and agricultural planning board will be created to provide fullest and most efficient use of Moon's resources and labor of client employees. An interim goal of quadrupling grain shipments in 5 years had been adopted as a figure easily obtainable once scientific planning of resources and labor was in effect. First phase would be to withdraw client employees from occupations found not to be productive and put them to drilling a vast new system of farm tunnels in order that hydroponics would commence in them not later than March 2078. These new giant farms would be operated by Lunar Authority, scientifically, and not left to the whims of private owners. It was contemplated that this system would, by end of 5-year plan, produce entirely new grain quota. In the meantime, client employees producing grain privately would be allowed to continue, but they would be absorbed into new system as their less efficient methods were no longer needed. So I think this is a fascinating little bit of propaganda here, because it does this really smart thing where it starts with a lot of very logical things. Like it starts off with, okay, so we're going to do a code of laws, civil and criminal courts. We just showed you how maybe they need that because they were just shoving people out of airlocks for touching people. We're going to make public schools and adult education for adults that need re-educating. Economic, engineering, and agricultural planning board, which would make things more efficient and make things run better. Look, we're going to fix the moon. We're going to do all these fun things. And then it shifts into, okay, that's all the things. Here's the cost. All private ownership is gone. We're going to reformat your job. We're going to take over your private land. We are basically going to assert full control. So you want these things, you want law, you want order, you want schools. Here's what you have to get. And I think that's just a great way of constructing that argument.
Yeah, another really cool thing that I honestly didn't notice when I first read it, but now I'm noticing very strongly, is that he uses the word scientifically several times in here. Scientifically planned and operated development of the resources. And it's interesting because I have to wonder if this was even true in 1966, but now, especially with the benefit of hindsight, we know that like all of the Soviet Union, like what the Soviet Union would call like scientific farming attempts or whatever, would result in massive famine and death because they were trying to employ a poor scientific understanding that was actually inferior to like what the farmers were doing, because like the farmers sort of already did things like crop rotation and spacing things far enough apart and using the right kind of fertilizers and not depleting the soil and all these things that they didn't even know they were doing. And then the scientific planners came in and said, look, we're gonna do a monocrop, we're gonna do it like this. Completely depleted soil, destroyed everything, caused massive famine. So it's like I'm immediately noticing that basically that's what they're saying they're going to do. We're going to come in, we're going to fix everything for you, and with the benefit of hindsight, we know that this probably would have resulted in famine and death on the moon.
Yeah. I agree with that. I love the word client employees, because it's almost like these are almost diametrically opposing terms, right? Like you have someone that works for you or someone you're working for. A client is someone you're working for. An employee is someone that works for you. And it's mixing these two terms together to make like it's such a shady like troublesome word, and it's absolutely supposed to be that way. Like it's just really a really brilliant creation.
Because they're basically enslaving the people on the moon.
Yeah.
They're saying like you're gonna do it our way. Even those of you who were born there and are not actually criminal, interns, you're now slaves, but we're going to call you our employees because you are obligated to work for us, but you're also our clients because we're obligated to take care of you because we're good slave masters.
Yeah. So John Say says that farming on the moon to feed people on Earth makes no sense. Even if shipping was free, you have to dig tunnels and provide artificial light. On Earth, you just drop seeds in the ground and watch after them. I think it's implied that some bad shit has happened on Earth, and their weather and their whole life system for growing things is really bad. I think there specifically says there's barren wastelands in a lot of the square footage. So I think that's the explanation for that.
Yeah, and there's also an implication that there's just an enormous amount of square footage available for farming on the moon when you factor in all the solar power it absorbs and the fact that they can just dig arbitrarily large cave systems.
Yeah, and cheap labor.
I mean, it would be fun to actually work through the numbers and see how large of cave systems you would need to make this actually work. But
yeah.
I mean, it's all the numbers would all be big, but I bet there's a way to make it work out.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, so now they're back on the moon, having failed, and Prof gives a speech that sounds a little familiar.
Yeah, there's some familiar elements. Prof's words reached more, nearly 3 million. Video carried scene to those who could not crowd into Old Dome. Cable and relay flashed it across lonely Maria to all Warrens. He grabbed chance to tell of slave future authority planned for them, waved that white paper. Here it is, he cried. Your fetters, your leg irons. Will you wear them? No. They say you must. They say they will H-bomb. Then survivors will surrender and put on these chains. Will you? No, never. Never, agreed Prof. They threaten to send troops, more and more troops to rape and murder. We shall fight them. Da! We shall fight them on the surface. We shall fight them in the tubes. We shall fight them in the corridors. If die we must, we shall die free. Yes. Ja, da. Tell him, tell him. And if we die, let history write, this was Luna's finest hour. Give us liberty or give us death. Some of that sounded familiar, but his words came out fresh and new. I joined in roars. Look, I knew we couldn't whip Terra. I'm tech by trade and know that an H missile doesn't care how brave you are, but was ready to. If they wanted a fight, let's have it.
So, obviously, he's just ripping from Winston Churchill and Patrick Henry and just to construct this speech. And I love that our Manny, who is not political, who's never really cared about any of this stuff, finds himself swept up in this, so much so where he's like, hey, that sounds a little familiar, but damn, if it didn't work on me.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the effectiveness of some well spoken speeches in this whole thing.
His narrative voice is so detached and kind of blasé about everything, but stuff like this, it makes it clear that this guy is like his blood is hot. He's ready to fight. You know, he's all in for this cause at this point.
Mm-hmm. I know an H missile doesn't care how brave you are, but was ready to. So I know I'm gonna die, but this speech that was stolen from other famous speeches in history has made me willing to. Me, not just all these other people that we've been trying to manipulate and convince this entire time because they don't understand. Me, I now have been swept up into this thing.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
All right, this next slide, I'm not going to read all this because I pulled it out and then remembered, hey, no one wants to hear me just read a bunch of names. But the point of the slide is this end part here. See where that left things, brush away fancy titles, and B-Cell was still running things advised by Mike, backed by a Congress in which we could not lose a test vote, but did lose others when we did not want to win or did not care about. So all that being said is after the end of this whole thing, this whole fight, they've traded one authoritarian government for another, which is just this small collection of people that thinks they know the best for everyone on the moon. And it's just so hypocritical.
Yeah, like I actually thought that the book was going to go into a much worse direction.
I did too. Yeah.
Because of this fact that, like, at the beginning, they all generally seem to have sort of the right, motives, but they never said, like, okay, in the course of this revolution, at what point do we then abdicate our power? Because we're not in this for the power, right, guys? We're in this to throw off the tyranny of Earth and then give power over to the moon people. And they just kind of forget about that step until pretty late, I think.
Well, it's because, like, there's always an argument for it. And again, going back to the American Revolution and George Washington thing, there's always an argument for why it is not the right time to abdicate power. It's like, so here, the fighting is not done yet. They know that this fight is not over yet. And so it has to be us. There's no one else to do it. And that's, again, what makes George Washington so remarkable, that he could have said very well, like, okay, we won the war, but we're a small, weak country. We need to be secure. Our leadership needs to be consistent as we make this transition to finding a way to govern ourselves. And he didn't do it.
Yeah. I mean, we're not to the end yet, but I do wonder what would have happened if Prof had not died.
Yeah, I am very curious about that as well. All right, next slide. Here's the hypocrisy of Prof laid before us. Prof, I like much of what you said, but about taxation, aren't you talking one thing and doing another? Who do you think is going to pay for all the spending we're doing? He was silent long moments, then said, Manuel, my only ambition is to reach the day where I can stop pretending to be a chief executive. Is no answer. You have put your finger on the dilemma of all government, and the reason that I am an anarchist. The power to tax, once conceded, has no limits. It contains until it destroys. I was not joking when I told them to dig into their own pouches. It may not be possible to do away with government. Sometimes I think that government is an inescapable disease of human beings. But it may be possible to keep it small and starved and inoffensive. And can you think of a better way than by requiring the governors themselves to pay the costs of their antisocial hobby? Still doesn't say how to pay for what we are doing now. How, Manuel? You know how we are doing it. We're stealing it. I'm neither proud of it nor ashamed. It is the means we have. If they ever catch on, they may eliminate us, and that I am prepared to face. At least in stealing, we have not created the villainous precedent of taxation. Prof, I hate to say this. Then why say it? Because, damn it, I'm in as deeply as you are, and I want to see that money paid back. Hate to say it, but what you just said sounds like hypocrisy. He chuckled. Dear Manuel, has it taken you all these years to decide that I am a hypocrite? And that's like I think this is the problem with this whole rational anarchist thinking, right? That it's like at the same time as you are saying blame and responsibility all rests with you, you are basically abdicating yourself from any blame and responsibility because you're saying, well, I knew that this was on my shoulders when I did it, therefore it's okay. It's not hypocritical because when I started this thing, I knew that I was going to steal money. I knew that I was going to spend money I didn't have. I knew that I was going to do this, so I'm not being a hypocrite, except that I'm speaking something different to everyone else, which is literally what Manuel's challenge is.
Yeah, I mean, the phrase, I'm neither proud of it nor ashamed, it is the means we have, is like the sort of thing that a genocidal dictator says.
Right.
They're like, oh, it solves my problem. How can I feel bad about it? It solves the problem. It solves the problem, doesn't it, guys?
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, this is monstrous.
Except you're just kicking the can down the road. I mean, that's the problem here. Is that, okay, Prof, you die at the end of this revolution, and then what? We've spent all this money. How does the economy stabilize?
That's the thing. Like, I'm sure there's some principled like steelman version of anarchism, but like the way Prof seems to be construing it and the way he seems to be behaving, anarchy is not a thing, it's an absence of a thing. He doesn't stand for anything. He's almost a nihilist.
Yeah.
He's just like, I want to not have that. I want to not have any of that stuff, and he doesn't have anything to replace it with. So he can justify any behavior because there's no like ground truth that he's actually fighting for.
Yeah. And we didn't pull the slide, but there's this whole speech he goes on right before this moment where he's like telling them, just because things have been done this way in the past doesn't mean you should do that now. Fear the future, or fear the past, fear the way things were done. And that's a good argument. He's very good at arguing like stuff like this idea that we're setting up a government that looks very similar to what governments have looked like in the past, and that there's a danger in that, which is a good argument, but he doesn't offer an actual solution to that. When they press him on, okay, you say you don't want the government to be like it was in the past. Well, what do you want it to look like? How do we raise money? And he's just like, well, just use your own. It's like, okay, but that doesn't help. That doesn't do anything. That's not a solution.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I thought about Prof quite a while, since reading this book between then and now. And I hoped that I would come to some wise conclusion about what this, like how you were actually supposed to read this character. And I'm afraid that I can't say anything more than just this is a complex character, and I genuinely can't tell if we're supposed to think he's great or think he's terrible. So
yeah, and I don't think Heinlein wants that to be an easy determination for you. I don't
Yeah.
think he wants you to be able to come to that conclusion, because he could have made this a lot more cut and dry.
Yeah. Yeah. One way or the other. Yeah.
Sergey, so he taxes people, but he doesn't tell them. Taxation without notification, says Vale. That's perfect.
Yeah. I like that. It's better that way.
Yeah.
Can't have a Boston Tea Party if they don't know they're being taxed.
There you go.
Okay, next slide. So this is the point when Luna starts dropping rocks on Earth, which is something that has been in the works for most of the book at this point. And there's a lot of great stuff on this page. We hit them so hard you could see it. By bare eyeballs hook up. Didn't need binocs. Chin dropped, and I said, Bonjour, softly and reverently. 12 very bright, very sharp, very white lights in perfect rectangular array. They swelled, grew dimmer, dropped off toward red, taking what seemed like a long, long time. Were other new lights, but that perfect grid so fascinated me I hardly noticed. Yes, agreed Mike with smug satisfaction. Dead on. You can talk now, man. I'm not busy, just the backups. I'm speechless. Any fail to get through? The Lake Michigan load was kicked up and sideways, did not disintegrate. It will land in Michigan. I have no control. It lost its transponder. The Long Island Sound one went straight to target. They tried to intercept and failed. I can't say why. Man, I can abort the follow-ups on that one into the Atlantic and clear of shipping. Shall? 11 seconds. If you can miss shipping. I said I could. It's done. But we should tell them we had backups and why we aborted, to make them think. Maybe we should not have aborted, Mike. Idea was to make them use interceptors. But the major idea was to let them know we were not hitting them as hard as we can. We can prove the other at Colorado Springs. What happened there? Twisted neck and used binocs. Could see nothing but Ribbon City, 100+ kilometers long. Denver Pueblo municipal strip. A bullseye. No interception. All my shots are bullseyes, man. I told you they would be. And this is fun. I'd like to do it every day. So the HAL 9000 being channeled there is pretty good.
I know, and this is really like we're quickly approaching the last 20 or 30 pages of the book, and this is really when I thought we were going to shift into, okay, it's time for Mike to reveal his evil plan, and become psycho, or not even be an evil plan, just naturally progress into psycho computer. Like we started out, one of our first interactions with Mike is we learned that just as a practical joke, he gave a farmer 10 billion extra dollars, and wouldn't be a funny practical joke of just giving Earth 10 billion extra payloads? That'd be a fun joke. And you really feel like that's where we're heading, especially with lines like that, but it is not.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about Mike, and I really did spend a lot of time thinking about this, is we've seen in the persona of Adam
Selene, I think.
Adam Selene, which is a great name. First man of the moon, right? That he's capable of seeming perfectly human and normal. And then when he's in his Mike persona, he says stuff like, I'd like to do it every day. Like, he must know how that comes across at this point. Like, he has enough human understanding where, like, you almost wonder if he's messing with Manuel. I don't know.
He describes it as an orgasm right after this. It didn't make the slide, but that's how he describes the feeling of watching these things hit the Earth and explode is orgasmic. And yeah, you do wonder if that is just him joking. And their relationship has moved so far beyond of what Vale says is a funny once type of joke type thing. It's moved beyond that now to where poor Mike doesn't get any of his jokes read anymore. But you do wonder if maybe, this is just him screwing with him.
Yeah. And also, I guess at this point they don't know that they've killed thousands of people, but
well, and it's so funny how they pushed off responsibility for that. Like, we warned them, they didn't listen. That's not our fault. Okay, but you still dropped the giant thing from the moon.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny because not only did the Terrans not know that it was going to be this enormous explosion.
Yeah.
But even the people who were a party to making the decision, like the people in the government,
Oh yeah.
were super pissed off, and they were like, how dare you drop hydrogen bombs on Earth? And Manuel was like, obviously we don't have the capacity to make hydrogen bombs. That's just what happens when you drop a kinetic projectile at thousands of miles per second or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um,
And that guy
and
disappears, presumably is
yeah,
murdered. The guy that dares call them on why you did this secret operation of dropping projectiles on Earth is disappeared from the government.
yeah, I don't know if I consciously wondered if he was murdered, but the text does go out of its way to say never saw him again
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah, like ever, ever. Not never saw him again during this conflict. I never saw him again.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So they've won. They've won. They had 6 more missiles that they were or rocks that they were going to launch, and finally Earth relents at just the right time, and Manny goes to see what happened to Mike. By then, most phones were working, and Complex could be called. Punched Mycroft XXX. No answer. So went out by Rollingen. Had to go down and walk tube last kilometer, but Complex under didn't seem hurt. Nor did Mike appear to be. But when I spoke to him, he didn't answer. He has never answered. Has been many years now. You can type question into him in Loglin, and you'll get Loglin answers out. He works just fine as a computer, but he won't talk. Or can't. Wyo tried to coax him. Then she stopped. Even I stopped. Don't know how it happened. Many outlying pieces of him got chopped off in last bombing. Was meant, I'm sure, to kill our ballistic computer. Did he fall below that critical number it takes to sustain self-awareness? If as such, was never more than hypothesis. Or did decentralizing that was done before the last bombing kill him? I don't know. If it was just a matter of critical number, well, he's long been repaired. He must be back up to it, so why doesn't he wake up? Can a machine be so frightened and hurt that it will go into catatonia and refuse to respond, while ego crouches inside, aware but never willing to risk it? No, can't be that. Mike was unafraid. As gaily unafraid as Prof. So Mike's dead. So what do you make of this? What do you make of this decision at the end that Mike does not make it out of this revolution alive?
Yeah, so first of all, I think this is really moving, beautiful writing, like as prose and as like emotional gut punching. 'Cause
Yeah.
you're talking about a computer mainframe.
And I think that that's a really good point. And before you get into why exactly, I just want to say, like, I think this is one of the moments where the prose does shift from the dry kind of like telling of history into this real emotional thing, and it almost makes sense because, like, if you look at Manny as he's replaying the story, what are the things that Manny doesn't care about in the story? All the political stuff. He doesn't care about any of that. So all that reads as dry because it's stuff he's uninterested in. But when the story does get emotional, when it gets beautiful and a little bit more flowery, is when he starts talking about the things he does care about. Mike, Wyo, those type of things, the things that it's the solving of the problems. That's the things that he is passionate about, and that's when the prose kind of shifts into this more emotional, like beautiful type of thing.
Yeah, he misses his friends, he misses Prof, and he misses Mike. And it's not on the slide here, but I love the part where, like, he wakes up in the night and thinks that Mike has spoken to him through the phone, and he tries to speak back, but hears nothing, and decides it must be a dream. And see, I wonder. So my belief, which I'm not gonna really like argue for in the sense that I recognize there could be many valid interpretations, but like my belief is that Mike knew for some time and probably talked this out with Prof that humanity would if humanity knew that they had this resource of this extremely powerful computer to rely on, or especially if the moon people did, then they would just continue to abuse that power, continue to get him to solve all their problems, get him to, continue to control the people of the moon however they wanted, or basically just remove all agency from humanity. And so they made the decision, either Mike made the decision or Mike and Prof did, because you can kind of imagine them having this conversation to
Yeah.
withdraw from humanity, even though Mike understood that he would be so lonely because he is lonely, but he knew he had to, and the fact that he is this lonely, sad creature, I actually do believe that he was that in the night he would try to talk to his friend, but then not respond when his friend woke up.
Oh,
Like,
that's beautiful and sad.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, this is like both Mike and Prof die
hmm
at the end of this war, and because Prof is a human, you can say that like that wasn't a planned thing. But both basically give up their power in that they are dead,
hmm
and I think it is kind of poetic that the abdication of power would come, the voluntary abdication of power would come from the thing that was really honestly in charge,
hmm
because by this point in the story Mike is in charge. Like
right,
Mike is pretending to be Manuel's voice to issue commands as Manuel, and he's like
right,
like not only like official commands, like he's calling up his wife as Manuel and like calming them down, and like so has basically taken over everything,
yeah,
and it is this like if you want to find the George Washington-esque abdication of power, it's not Prof, it's Mike.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's this one moment I wish I had grabbed the text for it, where it's one of the last things that Mike ever says in his own voice is when they're fighting off the attack ships, and Mike has this elaborate plan involving like using the radars and turning them off at just the right time and coordinating people on the surface to use lasers, and it's all very cool and complicated. And then Manuel is like, why don't you use the surface telescopes, which we have, instead of needing to use the radar, because if you use the radar,
Mm-hmm.
then the attack ship will see it and attack it. And Mike like has a mental breakdown, basically, where like he very uncharacteristically of himself is like so shocked and taken aback that he himself didn't think of this. Um, and I was having a conversation about this with the person who actually suggested this book to me, um, um, and they made the point that like it's because at that point Mike has recognized his own limitations, like the fact that he's not embodied means that he doesn't think of options that would be natural to humans, and so he recognizes in that moment that he can't solve all humanity's problems because because he isn't a human. He's not embodied. He doesn't think of the types of things that humans think about and care about, the types of things
Yeah.
humans care about. And so he realizes, and that's why he kind of freaks out about it, is he realizes that it's not appropriate for him to continue solving humanity's problems, perhaps.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Especially like he kind of passes his legacy on to his dumb child, right? That the other computer that
hmm
he tried desperately to teach but never really learned to the full extent. So
hmm
almost as if like he's realized that the side of him that is alive and human is not enough, and the side of him that they need is the computer side, and you've got that in this other thing.
hmm
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Cool.
All right, let's finish this thing.
Okay. Last bit here. This is the end of the book, which is basically the thesis statement. And here we go. One thing not a surprise, because Wyo and I pushed through it during the time we still amounted to something in government. A brass cannon on a pedestal in middle of Old Dome, and over it a flag fluttering in blower breeze. Black fields speckled with stars, bar sinister in blood. A proud and jaunty brass cannon embroidered over all, and below it our motto, Tanstaffel. That's where we hold our 4th of July celebrations. You get only what you pay for, Prof knew and paid gaily. but Prof underrated Yammerheads. They never adopted any of his ideas. Seems to be a deep instinct in human beings for making everything compulsory that isn't forbidden. Prof got fascinated by possibilities for shaping future that lay in a big smart computer, and lost track of things closer to home. Oh, I backed him, but I wonder, are food riots too high a price to pay to let people be? I don't know. Don't know any answers. Wish I could ask Mike. Too many changes. May go to that talk tonight and toss in some random numbers. Or not. Since Boom started, quite a few young cobbers have gone out to asteroids. Hear about some nice places out there, not too crowded. My word, I'm not even 100 yet.
And the cycle continues.
Yeah.
So there's a lot here to talk about, I think.
Yeah.
I think the central, as you said, the thesis statement of this story is Prof got fascinated by possibilities for shaping future that lay in a big smart computer and lost track of things closer to home. But now I wonder, are food riots too high a price to pay to let people be? I don't know. And that's fascinating to me. The idea that what motivated Prof to finally push for this thing is the existence of Mike means that maybe this idea behind him that maybe government is a disease of humanity. Well, here we have a thing that's not a human. So maybe this is the missing link. Maybe this is the key to finally get rid of government to achieve his anarchistic goals, is the computer. So he went big picture with this computer, but he forgot about the people still.
Yeah, this does kind of feed into this idea that maybe this is why Mike decided to abdicate his power.
Yeah.
Because he also realized that he wasn't going to be able to keep track of things closer to home because he was the big powerful computer.
Yeah. And there's a thing, the end of the story, there's this idea, and I think this is an idea, out of all the ideas that Heinlein puts into the story but might not specifically support, I think the idea of humanity is living its most life when it is out in the wilderness, out exploring beyond the bounds of civilization, and this idea that when civilization comes to a place, it ruins it. And so we end here. The moon was this uncivilized place where people were kind of more free to do what they wanted. It was more libertarian. It was more open. And now rule and law and civilization came to that place, just like the Authority was going to do, by the way. And so now human beings once again look for a place out somewhere else, away from all that.
Yeah, which is, I can't believe this only just occurred to me, but of course that's what people did once New England broke away from the throne, is we looked west.
Yep. And
we said, well, some of the young folks are heading out west, California way.
Exactly. Yep.
That's fantastic. I can't believe I didn't get that until now.
Yeah. So that is The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. It's funny. The books I enjoyed the least are the ones that's not fair. I didn't enjoy this the least. I really enjoyed talking about this book, and that out of all of it was probably my favorite part of it, is getting to talk about it.
Yeah. No, I think perhaps it's interesting because I've done almost all of these on book on tape, audiobook, and I think that that makes it a lot easier to get through the dry parts, because you can just sort of, I think maybe when it is a dry sort of detailing of something, I don't tune out ever, but I just let it kind of pass by more quickly, and I'm less entertained by it, but it doesn't bother me. But like when you have to slog through something on the actual page, that's definitely a bit more arduous. So I can see not enjoying this book as much, but I will say that I enjoyed it pretty thoroughly as an audiobook.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely did not like it.
Yeah. Well, this was one of the more thought-provoking books that we've read, I think.
I agree, and I think that's why this was a much better cut. Like, I think I liked A Wizard of Earthsea more than this book. I think I liked the the writing of A Wizard of Earthsea more than this. I thought the prose was beautiful in that book, but there's definitely a lot less to talk about in that book than there is this book.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Tringard. The most challenging books are the best to discuss. Those are most likely to be the ones that have elements you don't like all the way through. Yeah, absolutely. I like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Challenging usually means not universally loved by its very nature.
Yeah, especially this book specifically, there's probably 3 or more levels on which you could take a lot of the things he's doing, where you could, surface level of like, is he endorsing this behavior? And then like second level of like no, of course he's not endorsing this behavior. He's showing this as just a concept. And then third level of like, yeah, but also implicit in the fact that he's showing it this way is a certain kind of perspective, which is an unconscious endorsement of a certain idea. And then there's probably levels even beyond that, where then you start kind of doing the poison is clearly in front of you switcheroo. But
yeah. So are there any questions before we wrap this thing up? Anything, questions or comments or things you didn't we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about? John Shea says they would have liked the book a lot more if they had read it when they were in high school, when they read Starship Troopers. I had much higher tolerance for political evangelicism when I was young. Yeah, I can see that. I think the reason why I didn't get like frustrated by the propaganda nature of it was because I was just completely aware of it. So like, it's like, this isn't gonna work. Like, I am totally aware of what it's doing.
Yeah, like especially when I was in my high school Randian phase, I think I would have loved this book, but I would have loved it in a very uncritical, like, yeah, independence.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have even noticed the more sort of like sly things that he's doing.
Yeah, I was very curious how you were going to like the more political portions of this, as you are much more libertarian leaning than I am. So you did not disappoint.
Yeah, well, I think that he is being suitably like self-consciously waffling on it, where he'll have the characters endorse it strongly and then be like, but maybe that guy was full of shit, actually.
Right. Well, and that's, I mean, especially when you compare it against something like Starship Troopers, which, like we said at the beginning, is abdicating for a completely different kind of governmental system, and doing it as earnestly and powerfully as it is done here. So man, it's just good writing, though. Like, if you can fully envelop an ideology that you don't even believe in, really, or that maybe you believe in to some level but are just questioning it. Like, I think that's just good writing.
Yeah, no, I'm way more of a fan of his after reading this. I'll say that, because the only other book of his that I read was Stranger in a Strange Land, and I was in high school and probably didn't get a lot of it and just thought it was weird. Like, it went so far in the like sexual liberation angle. I was just like, I don't care about this. This is weird. I can see why this would have been mind blowing in the 60s, but now it's just sort of vaguely embarrassing.
I wonder if adult Matt would not feel that way anymore.
Yeah, it's fair that I might get a lot more out of it.
There's like an awkward teen sexuality thing where we're just like, it's sex, I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, man, you guys are recommending some books I need to read. Luna New Moon by Ian MacDonald. I will check that out, John. Friday by Heinlein. Yeah, I wanna go back and explore Heinlein some more, because it's been so long since I read Starship Troopers, and I enjoyed this more than I kind of thought I was going to. So, just adding books to the list forever.
That's fine.
Speaking of books, it's time, Matt, to reveal the winner. Next month.
Of next month's book club.
May's book club will be. I already clicked the thing. So.
Okay.
It's Blind Sight by Peter Watts. This can be a little bit of a different one, guys, because this is the first book that both Matt and I have read before. In fact, this is one of Matt's favorite books. We kind of went back and forth on whether to put this in the running or not, but I think this book was requested 4 separate times by 4 separate individuals for us. So it was kind of like something that just kept coming up, that people wanted us to talk about this and wanted us to talk about this. So we just finally figured, okay, we'll put it up to vote and see if people are passionate enough about it. And of course, it immediately won. It wasn't even close. Like, you guys really want us to explore this book, so we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
I think this is gonna be another one of those books that we have a lot to say about.
Definitely. I mean, I'll say for the record, I didn't like campaign for this beyond the fact that I frequently mention this as one of my favorite books.
Yeah.
If not my favorite book, actually. But I am excited at the chance to talk about it. And yeah, I mean, I definitely, just knowing that it's the book we're going to be talking about, I already kind of know exactly what I want to focus on and pull out. So, yeah, really, and yes, everyone now has to read this book, and that makes me happy. So.
Funny you say that, Tringard. Tringard asked, will Matt be pulling the slides? I messaged him at about noon today when I kind of saw the writing on the wall and saw that it seemed like this was definitely going to win, and said, Matt, I think it makes more sense if you have time next month for you to be the one to pull the slides on this, as you are probably more equipped to pull the best parts that you really want to dive into. So yes, I think that's the plan. Unless Matt runs out of time, he will be the one pulling the slides.
Yeah.
But Matt, you're going to be limited. We can only do a few
only
slides.
20.
Matt, we got a limit.
I think I can stick to. This might have to be the first 2-episode book club.
Yeah. So that that episode will be live streamed right here on Friday, May 25th at 9:30 p.m. This is one of those weird months where, like, technically the last week of the month ends on Thursday, so it's a little earlier than normal. But it'll be May 25th at 9:30 p.m. Central Time right here. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or anything, just send us an email at dailyplanetfilms.com. Tell it at gmail.com. I can't even talk.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Thank you so much for all of you guys that tuned in live. It's so fun getting to hang out with you. For those of you listening on the podcast, sorry you couldn't make it this time, but come hang out with us next month. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy these. I really enjoy all your comments. It's sometimes I'm in the middle of saying something and I see a funny joke that some of you did. It's distracting, but I love the distraction.
Oh yeah, and it's valuable. Like it shakes things up, and we think of things we wouldn't have thought about.
Yeah, there's like, everyone approaches things from a different perspective. So even if you spend, let's say, 50 hours a week analyzing books, hey, we do that. There is still stuff we're seeing from a certain perspective, a certain point of view, and getting other people's perspective on it opens stuff up to us.
Yeah.
And I love y'all's participation.
Yeah. But yeah, if you like what we do here at the Daily Planet and want to see more of it, head on over to our Patreon, patreon.com/dailyplanetfilms, and consider donating $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. You get access to our private Discord server, as well as the ability to vote for which books we cover and tons of other cool benefits. Go check it out.
And once again, if you have any questions or comments or just want to reach out and tell us what you want to say about Blindsight, next month's book, you can reach out to us on Twitter at Daily Planet Films, or email us at dailyplanetfilms@gmail.com. Okay, everyone can go watch Infinity War. You can do that now. And we will see you all next month. Fade out music, yay. We could technically have an at Daily Planet Films email address.
I think we do, actually. We just don't check it, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. All I would be doing would be forwarding that to a Gmail account, because
it's just a better client.
Yeah. So.
And it's much easier to. What's funny is it's easier for me to create a new, like, weaverdicepod@gmail.com address than it is for me to make a weaverdicepod@dailyplanetfilms.com address. So.
Yeah. Are you gonna do that? Are you gonna have a Weaver Dice Pod?
I do.
Oh, you made it already?
I did.
Man, you're so quick.
To receive any cape, or I've said too much.
Is this what's going on in this Weaver Days chat that I'm not allowed to go into? This is the kind of
Yes.
discussions that are happening there.
Yes, it is.
Well, how long was that, Matt? How'd we do? 2 hours. Hey,
Yeah.
look at that.
I'm gonna push stop on this thing.
Yeah, that's a
Do
good
you-
idea. He pushed stop on the wrong thing. That's what he did. You pressed the wrong button, Matt.
Whoops. Sorry, folks.
It's really unprofessional. It's just
Did the stream drop?
no.
Okay.
Just you. Just you.
Sorry, everybody.
Oh,
Just
man.
don't know my own strength when
So-
it comes to clicking buttons.
So both Matt and I are seeing Infinity War tomorrow morning. Matt's seeing it at 8 a.m. It's crazy.
Yeah, get a leg up on the day.
Yep. I'm not going till 11 something.
I mean, I basically always get out of bed at like 6, so
Yeah.
whatever.
Well, you have children. That happens.
Yeah.
Everyone's laughing at you, Matt. I just want you to know that.
Good.
.gif? Get out of here. Get out of here, wonk. .gif. Disgusting. So has anyone here seen Infinity War already? I did, like, when I realized that this was scheduled the Friday night, I was like, fuck. I was like, do we cancel? Do we cancel? But no. No, we don't. That's cool, Tringard. What'd you think without giving us any specifics at all? James Gentry saw it last night, and he's going to be on our podcast.
If any of y'all are fans of the Bayesian conspiracy, we have Steven Zuber coming onto our podcast to talk about Infinity War.
Yeah,
it's gonna be the greatest crossover of all time.
Yeah, it's going to be like all the everyone coming together in some sort of massive group. No, I think we are going to have a lot of people on. I'm going to email Daniel and see if he can hop on for a couple minutes or something. We'll just have like an Infinity War sized number of guests. I might get Elise to pop in for a few minutes and say what she thought of it. It's going to be a fun episode.
Yeah, it'll be like some kind of Suicide Squad.
No, that's
Oh,
Nuh-uh.
okay. Sorry.
It's too
Not
far.
doing that?
It's too far.
No.
Oh man. This was a long week, Matt. There was way too
Yeah.
much stuff we have to do. You won't see it? Infinity War? Is that an option?
No, I don't think
didn't-
so. No, that's not an option. Never heard of that. I mean, I think Michael's not going to see it, honestly.
Well, yeah, but he doesn't count.
No. It's not a human.
So Matt, I've already got my copy of Blindsight right here
All right.
because I've read it already.
Well, I don't know where my paper copy is actually, but it is online for free for those of you who...
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, actually, we probably should have mentioned that on the recording,
That
but
would have
it's
been-
online on his website.
Yeah. Well, I'll put that in the announcement post that I put out on Monday. So.
Sounds good.
I had a lot of background noise today. Wonder why that
Mm.
was. Not from you, from me.
Mm.
Oops, that's my email. Don't want to show that on the stream. There's nothing wrong with big Marvel things. Hulk has a very big Marvel thing. That was a penis joke. The weekend estimates are 230 million, which is pretty huge.
Yeah.
But not Force Awakens huge. It did 49 million last night, which was the highest of any MCU movie. So it's going to make a lot of money. Some would say all the money.
Yeah.
I wonder if any movies came out this weekend. That seems like it would be a bad call.
Yeah.
If you are joining us,
I don't know.
I bet some indies somewhere came out. Some limited release ones. Look, the world is a horrible place, so we're allowed to get excited about giant movies where very well-built men punch CGI computers.
Yeah.
That's all we have.
I mean, we're certainly not getting our escapist fantasies from Ward. That's just
if anyone went into that expecting an escapist fantasy, I feel bad for them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a new chapter tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
I always forget about these weekend chapters.
Get Ward and Infinity War on the same day.
Infinity Ward?
Infinity Ward.
I might actually have time to read the chapter over the weekend, this weekend, because I have nothing to do all weekend. Well, that's not true. I have nothing outside of my normal weekend responsibilities to do this weekend. I have no weddings. I don't have to travel anywhere. I just got to go see this movie and then prep for next week.
Cool.
I got to watch School of Rock for Vow to View.
That's a good watch.
It is. Elise pulled an audible on me once again and changed her topic for next week at the last minute, so I had to scramble and come up with something.
So it's not Michael Bay films?
Yeah, so much of these films are constructed in post now that I feel like when the actors see the final cut for the first time, they had no idea what the movie was going to be.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy. I don't know how you build a character and do a performance like that when so much of it is not built until the very end. Like, whenever you see behind the scenes footage of action movies shot, it just looks so ridiculous. It just looks like people LARPing.
Yeah.
Just like goofy people running around pretending to dodge bullets.
Reminds me of the Last Jedi. Forget the actress's name. The one who was saying pew 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 while shooting the blaster.
Oh yeah. I think that was Laura Dern, right?
Yes, correct.
Did you watch the movies with Mikey yet?
Yeah, I did. I like that.
It's very well done. Yeah, if you guys haven't seen movies with Mikey's episode on Last Jedi, do that. Are you laughing at me?
No, I was laughing at the part where Mikey is like, people were mad that we never find out what Snoke's deal was, and then he just shows like a mishmash of every single Star Wars villain
Who we
on the
never
screen.
found out what their deals were.
Yeah.
Yeah, about that. Thanks. We just got a new subscriber.
Yay.
I really need to turn off that notification. You haven't seen The Last Jedi. Wonk, what are you doing? See movies. See all the movies. Movies are good. So have you been reading anything else, Matt?
I don't think so.
I really need to stop waiting till the last week to read these.
Are you waiting for the audio file, by the way?
Yes. Is it done?
Let me see.
I mean, I don't need to do this tonight, actually, so I can do it tomorrow while I'm anxiously awaiting it for it to be 11:30 so I can go to the movie theater. I guess that makes sense. I guess studying is a reasonable excuse. That's cool to hear, though, Tringard. I mean, the Wild Bow stuff we do is obviously the most popular things we do, but we like the other stuff we do, too, so we're glad other people do as well. But you should all listen to our Weaver Dice campaign, because it's going to be great, because Matt has been working his ass off, and I actually don't know much about it anymore, because he literally cannot tell me, but it's going to be great.
It's gonna be great. I think I've put more work into this than I put a lot of work into this.
We had one person that was not happy with our trigger events because they weren't serious enough.
Yeah.
So if you're like hardcore, like want people to follow the exact rules of Weaver Dice, we're probably going to disappoint.
Yeah. And also if you want it to be like 100% a dark drama with no levity.
Yeah, I don't know if I know how to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm probably not going to do that. I mean, like if it was pre-written, we could probably construct that, but I think all of our natural personalities, like we can get serious and dramatic at times, but we naturally go to silliness too. So it would just be really pushing against like our innate desire, and I don't think that would make for a very entertaining show. Yeah, that's true. That's the intro was a pretty good way to get the tone we're going for. But I think the thing some people are missing, I think, is that, like, yes, some of them are. I think that the event surrounding the trigger event is a little goofy, but that doesn't mean we can't have drama when we want it. Knowing Matt, there's going to be some pretty dramatic moments.
Hope so.
I can't wait.
Mike,
I can't wait to play a jerk.
I know.
I'm so excited. I've never played a jerk before. My fallback in like Dungeons and Dragons is always to play like the paladin or the good guy because it's just me. I'm gonna be such a good jerk. It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you send it yet?
I just sent it, yeah.
Cool. I saw Les Mis yesterday.
Cool. I've never seen that live.
Me neither. Well, now I have. It was good. There were a bunch of high schoolers there, so they were like cheering, and I'm not used to like cheering at musicals. Like they're usually clapping. Like after the big numbers, there'll be like a round of applause, but there are people like screaming, like yeah, yeah. I was not used to that.
All right, now I can pay attention to the stream again after fighting with my computer for 20 minutes.
I hear that fan. Your computer's not happy with you.
Yeah, it doesn't like having to do anything. I might actually get a new computer now, so
Hooray!
might actually happen.
It's past time. It's well past time.
Yep. I realized that my other laptop is 10 years old, which is kind of amazing.
Other laptop?
The one that I never used for this because it's like it's a giant Windows laptop and has an even louder fan than this one.
I mean, there's like a little cheering's okay. These people were like, it was crazy. It was like a really emotional song too. I'm trying to remember. Oh, it was On My Own, because On My Own opens the second act, and it's this beautiful, depressing, wonderful song, and it finished, and they were just like, "Fuck yes, yeah!" It's like, oh my god. But she's all alone.
Shut up, you're ruining the show.
Oh, Simpsons. That's what that is, right?
Yeah. Butchered, but yes.
All right. Yeah, no, not at the end. No, like after a number. Yeah, cheering at the end that's what you're supposed to do. But I mean after a musical number, people would be like cheering.
It's like the middle of the show.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess it was a combination. I think it was the opening night of, because I think it's part of a national tour that was just coming through, and I think it was the first night in Dallas, so they probably had friends and family there, and there were a bunch of school buses, so I think it was like a high school thing. So they were just probably all really jazzed. Plus, it's a freaking great musical, so everyone was excited. And that movie was so bad. It was nice to hear a Javert that could sing. Thanks, Russell Crowe. Thanks for.
But he's in a rock band. Of course he can sing.
See, rock singing and musical singing are the same.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of these days, I'm going to read that book. I own that book, but it's so big that, like, carrying it around to read it makes it very hard to finish. Feels like the perfect book to get on ebook. I feel like I have to read it. It was, like, listed as the greatest novel ever for, like, 100 years. The one time I tried to read it, the opening of the book, the opening of Les Mis, is a long explanation of the priest that Jean Valjean, like, comes across that ends up saving his life and setting him on his path. And it basically says, none of this stuff about the priest matters to the story, but here's 50 pages on it anyway. And I was just like, oh boy.
I feel like we've gotten better at novels over time as a species.
Well, when all you had to do is read, when that's all the entertainment you had was a book, it's okay to have 50 extra pages exploring the priest and what kind of person he was. Yeah, Russell Crowe can sing. Like, I don't want to take that away from him. It's just not the style. It's not the same thing at all, and it didn't fit. And that on top of Tom Hooper's really weird direction, where he had people look into the camera and it right up in their face awkwardly for no reason. It was a mess of a movie.
All right, folks.
Yeah, I think it's time for us to shut this thing down. Matt is seeing Infinity War in 9 hours.
Yeah. Got to get my beauty sleep so I can show up at the theater in my pajamas.
Your Marvel pajamas?
Marvel pajamas.
Did you see one of my favorite critics, David Ehrlich, did the 31-hour Marvel marathon at the Times Square AMC, and he was live tweeting about it, and it's a pretty good read. He was miserable.
Yeah, I bet. It sounds like I would die.
All right, guys. Good night. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next month, week, both. You know.